Hello, everybody, and welcome into an early episode of Speaking Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I'm Nick Vete. He's Ricardo Martinez-Paz. The Steelers pick up a much-needed win to stay alive in the playoff hunt. The Eagles, man, probably their most brutal loss of the season at this point. A game that we were saying could potentially get them right for the end of the season in the playoffs, and instead they lose to former defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon in the Arizona Cardinals. We're going to dive into both of these games. I know Ricardo's got some strong emotions that he's probably trying to vent out, but before we get into things, Ricardo, how you doing, man? How was your New Year?
My New Year was great, man. It was a lot of fun. But it had to start off with that Eagles loss, which we'll get into. But how was yours, man?
It was good. Yeah, I was skiing up in New Hampshire. I visited a friend up there, so it was nice to just see him and spend some time, up in the Northeast and get some turns in. And also witness a Steeler. My Steelers were still alive come New Year's Eve in the playoff one, which I wasn't fully expecting. And Mike Tomlin secures another season where he's going to be over 500, even if things don't go right against the Ravens this week. But we'll get into that more. Man, I'm going to leave this up to you because, the brunt of this is going to be on, the Eagles losing to the Cardinals and where that leads to from here. Do you want to save that, or do you want to just get that out on the table first?
Let's save that for now.
Okay, let's save it. All right, so let's talk about these Steelers because they still manage to stay alive here, man. I mean, it wasn't looking too promising a couple weeks ago, and now all of a sudden this magic run that Mason Rudolph has this offense on, and they're still alive for the playoffs going into the final week of the season when really things kind of looked pretty grim there. But the Steelers beat the Seahawks 30-23. They had 468 yards of total offense, man.
Yeah.
I mean, so many of just the raw stats on paper that I was always saying, like, they got to be better here. They got to be better here. They need to do less of this. They need more of this. It felt like this game, it really all kind of came together in the form of 468 yards of total offense. They had no turnovers while forcing the Seahawks into a fumble. They had 25 first downs in this game, which I didn't have time to research it beforehand. But, I mean, as far as just doing this podcast and looking at it every week, I mean, it was rare that this team ever got above 20 first downs. And they had just 2 penalties. They've been very good all season, honestly, of being very disciplined with penalties and not, giving the team extra yards. And as far as, capitalizing in the red zone, they had 3 touchdowns that were scored inside the red zone in part of their 30 points. They were down in the red zone 7 times, so maybe could have been a little efficient. But I won't complain about, 21 points off of opportunities inside the 20. So all of these things on top of the fact that, Mason Rudolph continued to play mistake-free football while also slinging it around for he had 274 yards in the air. I'll just leave it at there for now. But honestly, man, it's still there's still a lot that needs to happen in this final week that we'll get into when we preview the Ravens game. But you know what? I give props to this offense for not quitting, never saying die, and just the team as a whole, battling through the adversity of the losing streak and injuries coming at untimely moments. I mean, the loss of one of their best defensive players, Minkah Fitzpatrick, at the worst point of the season. Adversity in the locker room with some of the players like George Pickens at various times, and all of this to just, keep fighting. And, now they've put themselves in the chance where if they win against the Ravens, they need some other stuff to go their way, but they could potentially get a spot as the 7th seed.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of touching on the Mike Tomlin streak, of a +5 or about 500 or above record. I mean, it's just, you see it on full display in the last 2 weeks, kind of just the way they've been coached, the discipline, as you've talked about. And I mean, especially on offense with, Mason Rudolph and, not turning the ball over. That's been, a problem the entire season for the Steelers. And just, really going down to the run and going back to their to their roots, really. Their ground and pound football.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a huge, huge part. I think that's kind of what we touched on last week. Is like that's what they had to do going into the game, and not necessarily put the game in Mason Rudolph's hands. And so with Najee Harris, 27 carries, 122 yards. I mean, this dude was running angry. I mean, he was just like stiff arming the crap out of players. That was fun to watch. I mean, Jalen Warren too. He also had 75 yards, 13 carries, a touchdown as well. So really relying on that run game. I mean, that was so pivotal. I mean, this that was pretty much the weakness of the Seattle defense, and I mean, just using play action off of that, and it just seemed like Seattle couldn't stop them at all because they couldn't stop the run. I mean, that was such a huge part of why they won the game, and they also just dominated time position too, like 37 minutes to 20 Seattle's 23. So it was just like when Mike Tomlin, when this team needed a spark, Mason Rudolph provided it somehow coming off the bench. Really, I mean, it's just it's surprising in like a really good way that this is happening, but yeah, never say die sort of mentality. Staying alive in the postseason, at least giving themselves a chance in the final week, as you said.
Yeah, man. I mean, and I was kind of saving the run game a little bit, but I'm glad you brought it up because I was spoiler alert, Najee Harris is going to get a stock up this week. But like, yeah, man. I mean, and I haven't always been the biggest Najee Harris guy, but he's been running the ball really well, and honestly, part of it too has been this offensive line just continuing to get better each week. I mean, this was an offensive line that I really expected to take big strides coming into the season, but it really hasn't been until the back half of this year. And really, these last two games, they've really showed it more. And in this game, this was probably their best game of the season. But,
Yeah.
really, Isaac Sayamalo and James Daniels in the middle. I mean, I'll even give Mason Cole some credit. And Broderick Jones, I believe, had 2 pancakes in this game. So this offensive line is coming together, man. It's still a few pieces away from being on the elite tier. But, they really took it to the Seattle defensive front. And, that was a big reason why they won this game, man. So they were kind of the focal point, and I guess I'll talk about the defense a little bit here too. For them, it was kind of the thing where I was sort of in the mindset of still the only thing that really scared me going into this game was Kenneth Walker possibly getting going because he was healthy. I know there was some question about that. But honestly, they limited him and they limited Seattle on the ground to just 88 yards. And through the air, DK Metcalf was really the only player that really scared you. I mean, Tyler Lockett only had 1 catch in this game, but DK
Yeah.
Metcalf did have a pretty decent game, but it wasn't enough that it could really cause, any issues for the Steelers. So they were able to kind of, get through it, and they were really just the better team overall than Seattle, man. And
Yeah.
they really took it to them, and there was points that it got close. I think Seattle won the second quarter alone, which made it kind of close going into halftime. But man, the Steelers just every time that Seattle kind of came knocking on the doorstep, the Steelers had a response.
Yeah, for sure. And just kind of touching on the defense, just they made the plays when it mattered most. I mean, they didn't have a sack until what was it, the fourth quarter, I think it was, and it was Nick
Yeah,
Herbig with that
yeah,
strip sack fumble. I mean,
yeah.
that was huge. That yeah. If you want to talk
Well, yeah,
about
I was
that.
just gonna say, yeah. I mean, Alex Smith had a fairly quiet game, and I mean, like it was just like one of those things where it wasn't the dominating defensive front that or the dominating defensive pass rushers that we've been used to. In recent weeks, I mean, that was 2 weeks ago they really kind of lit it up getting to the quarterback. This week was kind of a different story.
Yeah. I mean, it was just that was such a huge moment. I think well, they were at it was 27-20 at that point. And that strip sack, I mean, the Steelers got it back in Seattle territory. So I think it was in the red zone too, or somewhere in Seattle territory. But and then they added 3 more points to that to make it 30-20. And then that final drive, limiting the Seahawks to a field goal, even though they had driven all the way down to the 5. the Steelers 5-yard line. I mean, that's I mean, yeah, making the plays when they matter most, and ultimately why they ended up winning this game in the end and holding on. So
Yeah, man. No doubt. And I just double checked. That was the only sack of the game. And
yeah,
yeah, it definitely came at a huge point. And again, that's just kind of goes back to like just winning the turnover battle for this team has been so key all season. And they do it again here. And it's kind of those weighty downs that Mike Tomlin talks about. Can you take advantage of the weighty downs? Can you do things like win the turnover battle? So they get the win, they stay alive. The one other thing I want to talk about before we transition to the Eagles is just like I wasn't following this too closely because I thought the reports probably were somewhat false and were going to be kind of pushed back on by Kenny Pickett and the Steelers. But the reports came out after this game that Kenny Pickett supposedly refused to be the backup to Mason Rudolph
yeah,
prior to this game, man. Now, again, I didn't really look too closely into this. I still don't think he's practicing 100% right now. So
yeah,
I can double check the injury report when I get a chance, but um, I, I mean, I kind of saw it as it's like, all right, this is kind of like probably smoke, noise for no reason.
yeah,
Kenny Pickett's a competitive guy. I'm sure he wants to be the starter, but I think he's also, got to realize if these reports are true, like, hey, man, like I'm not even sure that that Kenny Pickett shouldn't be getting the ball, and that it's more important to see what your first round pick has in a season like this where it's still kind of on the outside looking and you can make the playoffs. But when you still have a pulse, and Mason Rudolph has played fantastic and he's put up 30 points the last 2 games, something that no Steelers quarterback has done in however many games.
yeah,
Whatever that stat is that kind of surfaced, like you're going to keep riding with Mason Rudolph, man. That's the hot hand. That's the hand that could potentially get you a win over the 1 seed Baltimore Ravens to get into the playoffs this week. So, like, again, and Kenny Pickett came out and said like things were kind of like, taken out of context, and that that's not like what he meant and stuff like that. But
yeah,
just not a good look and not something you want overall. And you obviously want him to be the backup over Mitch Trubisky at this point in case something should happen to
yeah.
Rudolph. But just kind of frustrating, and it'll be interesting to see, what kind of transpires from here going forward into week 18.
Yeah, that was really interesting when that came out. I also was like, is this like real? Like I don't know. I didn't see like too many sources reporting that. I can't even remember which exact person said that, but um yeah, that was like if this is true, that's definitely not a good look considering he's kind of the leader on offense when he's on the field. And I don't know how that would exactly rub off on the rest of the team and what kind of effect that would have. But you said it. Like Mason Rudolph's got the hot hand. Like I don't really see the reason why they should go back to Pickett, especially after him coming back from this injury. Um, and it just to me that wouldn't really make sense. It's just like what like yeah, he's healthy, but having him as a backup for now would be fine. Like it's just a short term thing. This isn't like like Mason Rudolph's gonna suddenly be the franchise quarterback, the face of the franchise. That
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know.
I mean, I'll play devil's advocate a little bit and be like, and again, it's like you got to earn everything in the NFL, whether you're a first round pick or a third round pick like Mason Rudolph, who was kind of on the brink of being out of the NFL, to a certain degree. Probably still had 1 or 2 more stints, after the season, even if he didn't get this opportunity. But you got to
Yeah,
earn everything. But I get from Kenny Pickett's perspective that it's like, all right, like I'm healthy. Like, did he really do anything that he deserved to lose the job? He
right.
didn't play well, but like he also wasn't necessarily like awful. And he's shown that he's a clutch quarterback. And this is an opportunity that if he feels like this is his locker room, I get that he wants to be the guy out there helping his team win. But yeah,
Yeah.
you got to ride the hot hand in Mason Rudolph.
Yeah, no, I don't blame him for feeling the way how like obviously he should feel that way if but I guess it's just in that case it's like um trying to be like a team first play, like a bit I don't know. Like it's obviously easier
Yeah.
said than done, but um being frustrated is totally valid if that's actually, how he feels. But um Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, and I mean, just to say too, I looked it up, and Kenny Pickett has been a full participant in practice all this week, so he should be in line to be the backup this week. Um, Again, I haven't seen whether that's been officially announced, but he's a full participant, and the only people that are questionable for the game are still the two safeties, Minka Fitzpatrick, Trent Thompson, and then also Landon Roberts, the linebacker, has been dealing. He was out last week with the pec injury, so that's kind of just a little injury update too. But we'll talk a little bit more about the Ravens game specifically, and what the Steelers kind of need to have happen in order to get into the playoffs um, in a little bit. But let's talk about the Eagles now. And man, Ricardo, I mean, just where are you at? That's all I'm going to start with.
uh, yeah, I still can't get over that loss. I'm just I feel like I've been saying some of these things like for weeks now. I mean, obviously, just watching games, it's clear this team is not playing well. Um, the coaching, I mean, oh there's so many things. It's painful for me to watch this team right now. Everything just seems so difficult. Like, and in terms of how I feel about them going into the postseason, I don't feel good about them at all. I think I even texted you this. They are a first round exit. Like, I just
Yeah.
if you seriously think you're going to, I mean, like, yeah, we beat the Bucks earlier in the season. Whatever. I mean, at this case, in this point, I don't think you're winning the NFC East. There's no way the Cowboys are going to collapse against the Commanders.
And that streak,
But
just a little side note, that streak's going to stay alive of a different team winning the division every year.
Yeah, that's oh my god, this is
Again,
like
I'm sure that's not
ridiculous.
what you want to hear right now, but
No, I
that's just
know, I
what's behind.
know. I'm very aware of that, but it's just like, how does it like? It doesn't make sense. It shouldn't have come to this. Like, this should have been. They were 10-1. They going into this like the last few weeks. Like, you had gone through the hardest part of your schedule. I mean, for other than the Niners and Cowboys. I mean, those games, okay, losing those fine. Those made sense, but you could kind of afford to. Um, and then it was like, all right, you have Seattle, you have the Giants, you have the Cardinals, you have the Giants again. Those are four winnable games, and here we are. They've lost to the Seahawks. They barely beat the Giants, and now they lose to the Cardinals, which was just beyond pathetic. I mean, oh my, like, should, should I just talk about the game now? Like, I just.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'll just say from my perspective, you heard me on the pod last week. I was totally in the boat of that first game on Christmas against the Giants. Just win it any way you can. Get back in the win column after the losing streak, and they did that. And then I was fully in the camp of with this game, even if like no matter what, this game had to be like, all right, like time to right the ship. The Cardinals defense is awful. Their offense hasn't been able to move the ball all year. Like, this is the game where you really kind of get right and kind of can build some momentum with wins against the Cardinals and Giants, two inferior opponents in back-to-back weeks before the playoffs, en route to winning the division. Ricardo, we said, when the Cowboys were playing the Lions this week, and we told people on this pod, root for the Cowboys, because as long as the Eagles take care of business, the Eagles will win the division, and therefore the Lions will get an extra loss that would allow the Eagles to be the 2 seed. Like, that feels so distant now. The thought of them even like that being the case feels so distant right now. And I mean, you could get into the game, but again, I'll just let you get in the game from there, and I'll save my other thought for once you talk about the game itself a little bit.
Yeah. Oh my god, yeah, that is just beyond frustrating. This has been such a like reading all the stuff that's been out on the Eagles and hearing all the like you know critics and like Stephen A at First Take, all these people saying
Yeah.
stuff. I'm just like, this is this is just really a low. Like, I thought the low point was against the Niners or losing to the Cowboys. I thought those were low points. Like, no, this is even worse. But or sorry, losing to Seattle was worse. But no, this is. I mean, the defense in this game was non-existent. The one thing I said going into the game, James Conner was the biggest threat, and Trey McBride, sure, the tight end, but um, I said if you can limit James Conner, then I think you're fine. And make try and make Kyler Murray win which I mean didn't end up happening. So I just need to say this was 21-6 at half. This is very similar to the Giants game where it was 20-3. And this week I felt different because I was kind of sitting there and I was like, all right, I didn't feel comfortable at all, actually. I was just like, all right, 21-6. You blew it against the Giants. You nearly blew it against the Giants last week. Kind of expecting the same this week. And that's literally what happened. And
It's an awful feeling to have.
I know. And I just need to list all these stats right now because they are
Well,
beyond
real quick, let me just say on that note, because that was
yeah.
kind of the other point I was going to bring up, is it's like even if the Eagles had somehow been able to score on that last like final drive that they had after the Cardinals took the lead and somehow pulled out this game, or even if they had been able to hold the Cardinals on their final drive where they scored a touchdown, if the Eagles had found a way to win the game, that still would not have been good enough. Like,
No.
and I'm sure the stats that you're going to get into are going to show this a little bit, but like allowing the Cardinals on all four of their drives in the second half to score touchdowns and like just allowing this inferior team to really just stick it to you in the second half and for the Eagles to collapse and blow that lead. It's unacceptable whether they had somehow miraculously won this game or still lost it in the fashion that they did. It wouldn't have been good. I needed them, for me to really believe in them and start to buy in them heading into the playoffs, they needed to go out there and firmly win this game and the next week against the Giants, and they just didn't do that. So go ahead with what you were going to say next.
Okay. So this was the 24th ranked offense, which is eighth worst. The Cardinals had 449 yards. That was their best on the season. They
Even
never
more than when
punted.
they played the Steelers.
Yeah, and they also never punted the ball, which I don't even know how often that's happened this season, but that's not good either. That's really bad. 32 first downs, the second most any defense has allowed the entire season. James Conner, 26 carries, 128 yards. He had 2 total touchdowns. I mean, seriously, was just gashing the Eagles defense. Michael Carter also had 61 yards on 7 carries. Time of possession battle was absolutely insane. 40 minutes to 20. The Eagles had 20 minutes. You would have thought maybe going into the game it'd be flipped. But no, it was the Cardinals who literally dominated. 72 plays to the Cardinals 47. Or sorry, 72 plays from the Cardinals to the Eagles 42 or 47. 4 drives, 4 touchdowns in the second half. There were only 2 third downs forced by the Eagles in the second half. That's horrific. I mean, just poor tackling, poor scheming, poor play calling defensively. I mean, it was just, yeah, literally a collapse. It was, I don't, that's putting it lightly. It was just terrible from the second half on. I might like, oh my God, I can't believe you could not stop James Conner or just force this, like challenge this team at all. And this is an inferior offensive line who I believe lost one of their tackles in the game. I mean,
Dude, it's so jarring when you like look at a team that's been so bad offensively and like that's the performance they put out. And I mean, dude, we were talking about this team being the best team against the run early on in the season, and it's just been so like
yeah,
we've been waiting for the other shoe to drop of like, okay, when will they refine that form? And it's just like, wow, like this defensive line, I don't know if it's the inexperience on the interior, but you can't even really say that. I mean, you still have Fletcher Cox there. I mean, I know you have the young guys in Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, but it's like, man, they like to see how far they've fallen from early in the season where they were dominating teams against the run. And for this effort in a game that you're going up against just one of the worst teams in football, a team that people are jokingly saying are trying to lose games, even
yeah,
though that's not the case. But man, it's just really tough to swallow.
yeah, and yeah. I mean, Shaq Leonard looked horrible. Um, I feel like the Eagles might have to not start him, and Zach Cunningham's going to be back. Like he just, I've been reading this the last couple of weeks, and just seeing that it seems like he doesn't trust his body. I mean, Jalen Carter had a horrific game against the run. He got moved way too easily. Jordan Davis his what's it called? His conditioning is being called into question. I mean, he's a bigger guy. I'm not gonna say I'm not using that as an excuse, but that's something that also came out this week. So it's all just negative, man. I mean, I haven't even touched on the offense, but it's just they also didn't do themselves any favor. It was just I don't know. How do you get dominated by such a bad offense? Like there's no answer for that at all. Just
No, no,
it's
there's not.
pathetic, beyond pathetic. Um, I guess I can touch on the offense briefly. It's really not much to say on that. They just for all the times that the Eagles were down um, earlier in the season against the Bills, the Chiefs, they always it seemed like they always had an answer, but um, in the moments when they probably could have taken advantage. They didn't on offense. I mean, just to start off the second half, Devontae Smith had a drop on a big third down throw from Hurts, and I'd like that could have set him up for another score potentially. Instead, they had to punt, and I mean that was one moment, but and just the when it was 28-28. Let me say this because this onside kick from Jonathan Gannon was like very smart on his part. Like I had when I saw that I was like he's trying to get the ball back. I'm like God, like it was smart because I knew the Eagles weren't going to stop him if the Eagles had scored, and I was like, all right, well here we go. And then the AJ Brown gets into the 20, and then it falls apart. A holding penalty sets them back to 30, and then it's 1st and 20. The Eagles run a quarterback draw or quarterback run, and he gets 4 yards. 2nd and 16, Jack Stoll and Julio Jones don't know who's subbing on, who's subbing. Like it just um, that was bad. And then Hurts has to just eat it and lose 4 yards. They burn a timeout on 3rd and 20. Like on 3rd and 20, like really, like, and then it Hurts just runs a screen to Kenneth Gainwell, and he only gets 4 yards. Devontae Smith gets injured on that play, and then they have to settle for the field goal, and then you know what happens after. I mean, the Cardinals march down the field, and then they score and they win the game ultimately. So I mean, it's just those two, like two plays specifically, the not the substitution play, not knowing who's going in. I mean, you should have this nailed down. Like you should have this figured out by now. Like
Yeah,
it's literally the second to last week of the season. Like that's pathetic too. And then burning a timeout on the 3rd and 20, you could have used that timeout later on, and potentially uh, on that final drive where you did have somewhat of a chance to win the game. But I mean, it's just that one comes down to the play calling. That one comes down to coaching. And right now, this team is not being coached well at all. I mean, it just feels like a burnout from Sirianni, from this entire team. It's almost like they went, not that they peaked necessarily, but it's just like um I don't know, they've just run out of gas somehow. I don't understand really like how it's come to this, but
yeah, man. It's brutal, and I mean, I still think that the majority of the blame to me falls on the defense, and that's both the players and the coaching staff.
yeah, for sure.
Really, they've been the weaker unit all season. Um, but also, it's like you said. I mean, it's like there's still coaching issues on the offensive side of the football, whether it's misuse of timeouts or messing up substitutions this late in the season. Like all of this stuff is like
Yeah.
unacceptable. And I mean, I know you haven't been a fan of the play calling of Johnson's really kind of all season. At various points, you've called into question the decision making, man, and it's just tough. And I think the Eagles are going to have to take a long look at these coordinators in the offseason, especially if it comes down to an early exit in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, get rid of honestly, at this point, I'm just like with anyone on the defensive side, get rid of them. I don't want them in the building. They clearly don't know how to tackle. Um, they just aren't on the same page at any point. There's always a miscommunication every single game, at least once. Like it's just like who I don't know who thought Matt Patricia was going to be the savior of this defense, but I sure didn't. Um, he's made this defense worse somehow, and I mean the players. I mean, even just watching someone like the film after the game and just like there's this one guy who does film breakdowns and he was like he did the defensive one. He does what offense and defense every week, and the defense is like this was the worst defensive performance I've ever seen in my 10 years of like film breakdown. I mean, that's pathetic. I mean, Hassan Reddick lining up over the center. Why? Hassan Reddick like dropping coverage. Why? Like there's so many different questions like that. I don't know what is going on. No one's on the same page. The play calling is so questionable. Like just get rid of everyone on defense. Seriously, I don't care. Clean house there, and Howie has to invest in linebackers and safety. Like you can't keep you know putting in these guys off the street and expect them to perform well. Like
Yeah, I mean, look at how big TJ Edwards has been for the Bears this year.
yeah, yeah. So
It's like Marcus Epps is following up last season with another really good season. Like there's value to having these guys. There's a reason that they're talented. You can't just grow them off the practice squad like he's kind of
yeah,
assumed he could do, I guess, to a certain extent. I think this is a good transition us into stock up, stock down, and let's just stick with the Eagles for now because I
yeah.
was just going to ask you like, who do you mainly blame for this? I mean, I'm sure it's going to be mainly stock down that you have some gripes that you have to get out here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say the stock up, which is my only one, is Julio Jones. I mean, he had 2 catches for 34 yards. Both of them were touchdowns, and yep, that's the only highlight of the only stock up there. And so now he has 3 touchdowns in the season. Good for him. Congrats, man. Like, I really don't care, but yeah, he was literally my only obligation to give a stock up for. Stock down entire defense, everyone, like I said, the entire like coaching staff, every single person involved with defensive mind. I mean, like seriously, just I already laid it out, and it's just pathetic. And I really don't expect this unit to suddenly turn a corner against the Giants, like and be dominant. Like I just don't expect anything from this team right now.
No, I
Um,
mean any games that they win going forward, they'll be winning in spite of their defense, not because of their defense.
Yeah, and that's not how that's supposed to go, especially with some of the big names you have on defense, but so be it. That's just how it is. Sirianni is my other stock down. He has to I mean, I said this already too. Like just it feels like lack of preparation, bad coaching, just I don't know. Something's clearly not clicking and um I'm not going to say he's lost the locker room, but like just the frustration has come out so often in recent weeks. And even Sirianni on the sideline, I think he was like, I don't know who he was yelling at, but I think it was a coach on the defensive side or something. Even him, like, it's all just coming out. It's all just ugly, and I'm tired of him saying the same things he's been saying the last few weeks, like, oh, we got to stay together. We're not where we want to be right now. We want to play better football. I'm like, dude, you have a week left before the
Yeah.
postseason. Why are we still
Yeah.
saying like
And
I
this is like what's frustrating about when you hear like the Eagles are going on a team outing to like do an escape room. It's like that's
I
what they're doing now. That's the magic fix for the like this season, going and doing
oh,
team bonding in an escape room.
yeah,
Like
man.
I was shocked when I heard about that, man.
I was like, if this had been a coach doing that, like it was AJ Brown's idea, but still, it was just like, why is it so late into the season that we're doing things like this? And it's like, what is this team not close at all? Like, I don't understand. Like, it's just everything's so confusing to me. And I mean, Sirianni's, part of the reason the Eagles aren't going to win the NFC East. Like, this is a historic collapse to be 10-1 and to have lost the next 4 out of your 5. It's just, I mean, literally the 1 seed was within your reach. The division was within your reach. Like, it's just it's up there with one of
And
the
now,
worst
and now, I
collapses.
mean, we'll talk about this when we preview their last game of the season. But now it feels like their season is on the brink of pretty much coming to an end.
Yeah, it really does, man. That's all I have to say because no one other than Julio Jones deserved to stock up.
All right, sounds good, man. Well, I'll get into mine a little bit. I didn't really have a stock down this week just because I mean the Steelers have been playing good football in back-to-back weeks. And I mean, I could have given it to, maybe like a defensive player that didn't really put out, big numbers. I thought about maybe Deontay Johnson, but I mean, he
Yeah.
still had 4 catches for 76 yards. I mean, it's hard to expect him to like put up the numbers that George Pickens has 2 weeks in a row. But
Mhm.
those were just kind of my thoughts for stock down. But really, the Steelers are the complete kind of opposite end of just how you're feeling about your team. And for them, my stock up. I guess I'll just say George Pickens because I just alluded to him. I mean, he had another good day of 131 yards. On I don't know why I wrote 2 catches. I think he had 7 catches. I don't know why I wrote that. I
Yeah,
mean,
I believe it was
early
7.
morning, he had 7 catches. For some reason, I wrote down 2 receptions. But no, he had 7 receptions, 131 yards. So another good day for him, man. He's such a big offensive weapon, and he's really come on strong these last 2 weeks for the Steelers team. And I also alluded to him earlier. Najee Harris really carried the load for the Steelers. 27 rushes, 122 yards, 2 touchdowns, one of his best games of the season, if not one of the best games of his career. And like you said, he was
Yeah.
running angry behind this offensive line. And the Steelers running attack really took it to the Seattle Seahawks. And then my last one on offense was Mason Rudolph. He's still just, leading this offense. 18 for 24 for 274 yards, no turnovers, man. I'll take that. I'll take that any day of the week from my third string quarterback.
Yeah.
And yeah, Mason Rudolph has given this team a lifeblood and has given this team a chance to make the playoffs. I mean, I honestly just wish they'd turned to him earlier when Kenny Pickett went down, rather than see Mitch Trubisky out there. But those are
Yeah.
my three on offense for my stock up.
Yeah, and I mean, rightfully so. They all deserve love, all deserve credit. I mean, yeah, Pickens. I mean, kind of just thinking back to last week, or I guess 2 games ago, where he just goes like this and just like
Yeah,
into the camera. I was like, yeah, that's kind of what they're doing right now. Um,
yeah. And
so
I love it,
yeah,
man. They just need to block out anything from the media, anything negative, and I think they've done that. And I think Tomlin deserves some props for that. For really just,
yeah,
I mean, this team could have folded. This team could have lost. You
oh yeah,
know, this team could have lost. They could have lost these last 2 weeks just as easily as they've won them. Even though they blew out the Bengals a little bit, but it's like
yeah,
this is a team that was facing serious adversity, and they've come and they've given themselves a chance. So I give them props to that, no matter how bad that losing streak was a couple weeks ago. And my other two stock ups just go to Eric Rowe and Miles Jack. I mean, they were first and second on the team this week in tackles, after being signed off the street just a few weeks ago. So, I
yeah,
mean, to see them go from, being on their couch to the practice squad to now being like the leaders in tackles. I mean, it's like, it shows you like, props to them and just kind of the fact of like any given Sunday, like anybody can have a good game. And like, these guys have really just, without these two players, I don't know where the Steelers would be, because their inside linebacker group was, down to, basically rubble. And the safety
yeah,
group was obviously missing a ton due to injuries and the suspension of DeMonte Casey. And Eric Rowe has really stepped up along with Patrick Peterson, who really never played the position up until this season. And I mean, the way that Peterson's talking, it sounds like he has interest in making that his full-time position come next season. So we'll see how all that unfolds
that's
down the road.
interesting.
But
Yeah,
as of right now, those are my stock ups.
yeah. I mean, that's yeah, shocking how literally, well, not shock, but it's just like surprising how like Eric Rowe and Miles Jack kind of just coming off the street, really, just like stepping in and doing pretty good jobs. Considering, yeah, they weren't really, um, playing
Yeah.
like 2 weeks ago. So,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
and then that Peterson plan, I didn't actually know that. That's interesting that he might transition to like full
well,
time
again,
set.
and it's not like he's come out and said like, "Oh, I want to be a full-time safety," but the way he
Right, right.
talks about how it's like his, ability to read defenses and stuff like that, like he feels like he can really capitalize from the position. And this is something that's been talked about even coming into the year, was like, "Oh, could we see Patrick Peterson transition to safety as he gets older and loses a step a little bit?"
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so so we'll see. And yeah, I don't want to dive too much into that, but you start to run the possibilities of, if you can have Peterson play more of that traditional free safety, and you have another guy like DeMonte Casey come back next year and be the strong safety, you really could free up free up Minka Fitzpatrick. But again, these are conversations for down the road.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the last week of the regular season here, man. Week 18 could potentially be the last time we talk about Steelers football for a while because they need a lot of things to go right. So let's talk a little bit about this game first. The Steelers going up against division rival Baltimore. When they played Baltimore earlier in the season and beat them. Now, if you remember that Week 5 game, the Ravens really were the better team. They kind of just handed the Steelers the win with turnovers and drops and not capitalizing on opportunities, and the Steelers just kind of winning in an ugly fashion.
Yeah.
But the Steelers have somewhat had the Ravens number lately. I mean, you remember last season in the season finale, Kenny Pickett threw the game-winning touchdown to Najee Harris. So the Steelers have kind of had the Ravens number to a little bit in recent memory, kind of since the end of the Ben Roethlisberger era. The Steelers have played somewhat well against the Ravens. And they're going to need that again. I mean, the Ravens have the best defense in the NFL, man. So it's not going to be an easy task going out there and throwing for, and scoring 30 points again like they've done the last 2 weeks. I mean, I think a little bit unrealistic. Now, the one factor that's really going to be interesting in this is, the rest versus rust conversation that always comes up this time of year, and whether, Harbaugh is going to sit most of his starters. I was talking to my friend Rob that I visited over New Year's, and I was saying if I was Harbaugh, I'd have all my starters play the first half and then pull them at halftime just so that they can go through the whole week with the normal routine of getting ready for a game and, still not developing any rust, playing a half and then pulling them at halftime. So I still don't think there's been any real kind of official announcements. I was trying to read some so actually Harbaugh announced Wednesday that Lamar Jackson will not play Saturday against the Steelers. So at the very least, the Steelers will not have to worry about seeing Lamar Jackson. The Ravens are allowed 6 inactive, so you wonder what other starters they might sit. But that's kind of going to be the question of who do they sit, who do they not sit. And coming into this game, the Steelers are a 3.5-point favorite. So I kind of figured that the Ravens were leaning that way more towards resting some of their starters. But that's going to be the biggest thing that gives the Steelers a legitimate shot in this game is going up against Tyler Huntley and some backups.
Yeah, I mean that definitely gives them a shot to at least win the game. And not having to worry about some of their starters playing. I mean the Steelers have everything to play for, so it's not like they're not gonna play hard. I'm not saying the Ravens aren't gonna either, but at least it makes it more winnable. And I kind of like that idea too, that the Ravens probably should have had their starters in for a half, but
that's what I think would have been the smarter move, man. I'm a little bit. I mean, I guess I'm not surprised, but now you're talking about when the Ravens played their first playoff game, like all these starters that you're potentially. I just pulled up the Ravens injury report for this week, but OBJ is out. Kyle Hamilton is questionable. Zay Flowers is doubtful. Marlon Humphrey is out, although I think he's been dealing with something. I thought for some reason he was dealing with something, but I couldn't remember. So Kevin Zeitler is out. They've already declared a lot of guys out. I don't know if this is the smartest move because the next time they're going to be playing a game is going to be in the divisional round of the playoffs with all these guys on 2 weeks rest. So we've seen the rust be an issue before with some teams that sit their guys for extended periods of time. It's one thing when you get 1 week off, like kind of a bye week. It's another thing when you go on 2 weeks off. That's when you can really kind of see this rust start to set in. So it's questionable to me, but this is to the Steelers' benefit for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, that's interesting how it shakes out, at least defensively, and their ability to, because I mean, like you said, the Ravens' defense is the best in the league. And I wonder how the Steelers will attack that, considering a lot of backups will be in there too. So I feel like they'd have to lean on the run in this game again, sort of just going with that. And
for sure.
And kind of just what you've been doing the last 2 weeks, just Mason Rudolph can't turn the ball over. And just delivering passes, making the passes that are necessary to win the game, essentially. So I still think this could be a close game. This should be a
I
close
I do
game.
too, man. I'm not taking this game lightly, even if the Ravens are playing their backups.
Yeah, but it's kind of this is what I don't like about the last game of the regular season when things are already like clinched. It's like they don't like teams typically don't play their starters unless they have something to play for. So,
Yeah.
but this is just how it goes. So, it's definitely an interesting um sort of final game for the Steelers.
And I mean, as far as the Steelers, offense goes, I'm with you. Keep running the football. I'm interested to see if George Pickens can continue to kind of exploit, different corners. I mean, especially now if Marlon Humphrey is out for this game. But yeah, man. I mean, it's like there's definitely that's a factor that's definitely going in the Steelers' favor of the Ravens. Kind of resting these starters, and it's going to be down in Baltimore, so you're dealing with the crowd again. But this is definitely still a winnable game. And,
Yeah,
like you said, Mason Rudolph, just keep doing what you're doing. Don't turn the ball over, spread it across the field. Even if some of the players on this Ravens defense sit or don't play the full game, I mean, it's still a talented unit, so you can't take it lightly. Um, I guess the last thing I'll kind of say is the scenarios for the Steelers to get in.
yeah,
Um, I've been looking. The two most common seem to be, and it's nice the way it's set up this way. So the Steelers play at 4 on Saturday. So we'll know immediately whether they win or lose, whether they're still alive. Then the
yeah,
game after that is the Colts and the Texans. So whichever team loses that one, the Steelers are going to leapfrog if they win. So
yeah.
the Steelers need to win their game. They need to, obviously have someone's going to lose in the Colts Texans game. That is going to allow them to jump them. And then the last thing would be on Sunday at 1 o'clock, the Jaguars play in Tennessee against the Titans. Trevor Lawrence still questionable for that game. The Titans
Mhm.
have actually been very good at home this season, and they're at home for this game. I think pretty much all of their wins have come at home. They've got some big wins. They almost beat the Ravens at home a couple weeks ago, so they're a strong team at home. And if the Titans can beat the Jaguars at home, that would allow the Steelers to get in as the 7th seed, with obviously the winner of the Texans and Colts winning the AFC South. That's the first scenario. The next scenario would be the Steelers winning, obviously one of the teams in Colts Texans losing, and then the Jaguars could also win their game, but that would require the Bills to lose to the Dolphins.
Yeah,
They also play on Sunday. Then the Steelers would also get in, and the Bills would miss the playoffs, which is shocking as it may
yeah,
be. That's the other option. So that's kind of the two main ways the Steelers can get in. I don't know if there's a third way with a bunch of random tiebreakers that they could get in, but ultimately, it's not a crazy amount of things that they need to have happen, Ricardo. It's as simple as them winning and the Bills losing could get
yeah,
them in.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah,
I think you're still the option that I'm rooting for the most is the Jaguars losing, because they play at 1 o'clock, so that could kind of lock things up before the Bills game even gets underway, because I think the Bills play in a later time
yeah.
slot. If
I
I'm
think
not,
maybe not.
yeah, they play the Sunday night football game against the
Oh,
Dolphins.
yeah, they do. That's
So
right.
they're late. So I mean, that would be anxious for me to have to wait that long to find out if the Steelers make the playoffs or not.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm sure the NFL's rooting for it because it would create some drama. But I also honestly, if I'm being completely candid with you, I think the Bills are going to win that game and win the division. I think Miami's
Yeah.
pretenders. I think they're going to take care of business. The Bills are home in this game too. They've got a lot. Oh, excuse me. Actually, they're in Miami. That's my bad. But I still think that the Bills are the better team, and
Yeah.
they're going to be fighting for their entire playoff lives. Where Miami's still playing for the division, but I don't know, man. I just don't really believe in Miami. I think they're pretenders at this point. So I'm going to be rooting hard for the Titans to beat the Jaguars, and especially if Trevor Lawrence isn't 100% healthy, I think that's the likelier game that the Steelers get a team to lose. That they essentially need the Jaguars or the Bills to lose, and I think it's more likely that the Jaguars lose.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, that's yeah. That'll be. There's going to be a lot of drama in the in the final 2 days of the NFL, which I mean, that's I mean, all you could want really as a neutral fan. Like if you're just looking at that point, it's that standpoint. But yeah, I mean, just first and foremost, get the job done, get the win, and then worry about the rest after. But
Yeah, and I mean, one last thought. I mean, Shane Steichen in his first year as head coach of the Colts with Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew, the quarterback that everybody said, if you want to tank, bring Gardner Minshew into the building. And with Gardner Minshew, he's got them in a position to potentially win the division if they beat the Texans at home and the Jaguars lose in Tennessee. So
Yeah.
I hate to make we're already talking tough talk for the Eagles. I hate to make it even worse for you, but I had to throw that in there.
Nah, but I love Shane Steichen. I genuinely like wish nothing but the best for him. So I'm cheering for them regardless. So
I am too because I put money on them to win that division a few years back. So,
nice. That's funny. That's great.
all right, man. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the Eagles. They got this final game against the Giants, and just kind of like, you know, I think you can elaborate on your feelings about where they're at and kind of coming to a close of the season and going into the playoffs here a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep this brief because like I listed all the stats last week on how bad the Cardinals were, and I just throw everything out the window now because if you can lose to the Cardinals, you can literally lose to anyone. So,
Yeah,
um, I just don't feel great about this game generally. I mean, the Giants are also bad defensively. I mean, the one thing they do well, I guess, is blitz, and I mean that's kind of just how Wink Martindale runs his defenses generally. So, offensively, I guess just um, build like this pisses me off too the entire season too. Like put in a hot route. Like I don't know why you don't just have someone short, like in case there's a blitz because I swear, like most of the time, it's Jalen Hurts scrambling because he doesn't have a quick outlet, like a quick flat route or someone like just over the middle of the field. I don't know. It's just like this offense is not built in a hot route at all this season, or maybe like a few times there. I've actually noticed a few, but it's just they don't do it enough. But yeah, I'm really not going to throw any stats to you, and because this is also this is like a situation of last year where it was kind of the reverse. It was the Cowboys who started. They had their starters in for the first half, and they looked up in the score and saw the Eagles were winning. Um, and then they just pulled their starters because at that point the Eagles had clinched the 1 seed and the division. So this year is the opposite. Now it's it could be that the Eagles starters
yeah.
are out there and they pull them at halftime depending on how the score is in the Dallas Commanders game. So again, it's kind of difficult for me to really you know rely on specific players because that could realistically play out where the Cowboys are beating the hell out of the Commanders in the first half. And I mean, I seriously don't expect the Commanders to pull off some upset. It's very, very unlikely. So,
I see that as such an unlikely scenario.
yeah, I mean, if that were to happen, that would be such a choke job on the Cowboys. Imagine, like, no one wants to win the NFC East at that point, but yeah, so it's kind of tough for me to really say. I mean, I don't know. Just I guess whoever's in the game, just to keep it as clean as possible. Like, offensive, like defense, I genuinely just don't trust this defense at all. Like, let's say hypothetically the starters were in the entire game. This could be another shootout, like it was 2 weeks ago on Christmas Day. So like for the defense, just I don't know, get some sort of stop, man. Like, can you improve at all? Like, you can't get any worse than last week. That was the lowest point I think I've ever seen an Eagles defense ever. That was the worst I've ever seen the defense
That's
play.
a bold statement, man.
I'm not even kidding though. That's how bad that was. I mean, it was the start to finish. The very first play, it was like a play action that every single player bid on. But I mean, that set the tone early. I was like, yeah, this is gonna be a long game. But dude, I don't know. Like there's I literally could give you so many stats, but it is not. It doesn't mean anything if you can't go out on the field and produce anything. Like, like
Well,
just
why don't you talk about this? Because again, I feel like there's a lot of variables of this game. Of we could see the Eagles pull the starters if the Cowboys are up big, and this game could just be a shootout. Really, either way, the Eagles are going to be locked into the 5 seed. whether they win or lose it. And the Giants, they're just playing for their jobs at this point. But just talk a little bit more about just how you see this team kind of like you've already talked about this, that you've said they're a first round exit in the playoffs, but it's like, do you have any hope? Is there anything they could do or anything that they could, maybe, put out on the field that could convince you, okay, maybe they have a shot to make somewhat of a run in the playoffs?
I don't know, man. Like I think the reason, I mean, I'm only hopeful because of the offense. And that's really, I think it's just going to have to be the offense carrying this team in the postseason if they want to make any sort of run. Because again, the defense isn't stopping anyone. They can't stop a parked car. Like seriously, like it's just bad, dude. Like I mean, it's there's going to be a lot of pressure on the Eagles offense. So I think that's where you can try and clean things up in this game for however long you have them in the game. Just please just try and limit the penalties and I mean turnovers haven't been as big the last 2 weeks. I don't count the interception at the end, that Hail Mary.
Yeah,
That's just how it goes. But I think they've been playing better on offense. They've been a bit more creative running the ball, running out a pistol. Actually having some tosses, some pitches. So if you can maybe keep building off that offensively, then I think you have a shot. But I'm telling you, man, the defense is going to be the reason that this team doesn't go far because they can't
yeah.
stop anyone. So my expectations for the defense are very low. Offense, I mean, yeah, they're gonna have to do most of the work and carry the load, really. So that's there's not much more for me to say on that front, really.
All right, let's get into predictions as we close this episode out then. Let's just keep with this Eagles Giants game first. Philadelphia goes in this game -5.5 favorites at the Giants. Kind of crazy. When we were talking about, Chris Day and the Eagles, potentially righting the ship against the Giants, then they were 11.5 point favorites. So all of a sudden, I mean, that's a pretty significant drop just based off of the fact that, yes, they're in New York for this game and also that brutal loss to the Cardinals. So just 5.5 points. And to put in perspective, last week, I was wrong on both the result and the spread. I predicted the Eagles to win and win big, and they didn't. You predicted the Eagles to win, but not to cover the spread. So I mean, you were right about the spread, but
Yeah.
but yeah, obviously it was even a little bit worse than that. So yeah, now here they're -5.5 point favorites in New York. What's your prediction for the game?
I'll say 27-24 Eagles win, but I'm not even convinced by that. The defense could allow more points, and ultimately the Eagles could lose. So I don't know, man. I'm gonna say regardless, the Giants cover. So
Okay. Okay, fair enough. So we're kind of on the same page. I have the Eagles winning, and I also have the Giants covering. I do have the Giants scoring some more points, though. I have the Eagles winning 32-28.
oh
Um,
god,
so kind of that same thing. But yeah, I think it's going to be, Tyrod Taylor's actually kind of looked good for the Giants the last 2 weeks.
I know that's
Coming in
why.
for relief against the Eagles and last week as their starter. This Giants team, I have a feeling this game's going to be close, man.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't even want to watch it, but it's fine. I will end up watching it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough, man. I'm sorry, but all right. Let's close it out with the Steelers. They are -3.5 point favorites at Baltimore. Last week I had the Steelers winning and covering, so I was correct on both fronts. You had the Seahawks winning, but the Steelers covering, so you were right on the spread, wrong on the
Yeah,
result. They ended up scoring way more points than I thought they were going to, but still got the
yeah,
win. So here, they are -3.5 favorites. I still think this game's going to be close, man. These teams always play each other close, especially towards the end of the season. They've had a lot of close battles. Wouldn't shock me if it came down to a field goal at the end of the game. Justin Tucker, Chris Boswell having to kick a long bomb to win it. I'm going to have the Steelers winning this one 23-19. So they win and happen to cover the spread by that score. And they are going to get into the playoffs as the 7th seed and, give TJ Watt an opportunity to get his first playoff victory.
Oh, that would be amazing. I mean, like I'm cheering for the Steelers really hard right now because I can't even cheer for my own team with how bad they're playing. So I'm gonna give the Steelers the win too. I'm gonna say 16-13.
Ooh, low scoring affair.
Yeah, that's my We'll go with that.
Steelers win, Ravens cover. Sounds good. All right, man. Sounds good. Nothing left to do but wait and see how it all plays out. And I mean, yeah, we kind of know where the Eagles are at going into the playoffs. We are just kind of waiting to find out whether the Steelers are going to be in the playoffs this year. So that's kind of all it's come down to. You got any final thoughts here before we wrap things up?
I'm just rooting for your Steelers, man. I don't
Can't
know.
even get a go Birds?
Nah, I can't even say that right now.
They gotta earn your respect to say that, man.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see if they can bounce back this week. We'll see if the Steelers make the playoffs. And we'll talk to you again real soon. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Peace out. Bye-bye.